Hello and welcome to our 400th episode of Literary Gladiators, the show where we discuss and debate literature in all of its forms. If it's written work, it's game. Let's meet the panel.
Hi, I'm Larry.
I'm Dan.
And I'm Josh. Feels great to be at this point. 400 times we've discussed works.
Wow,
Yeah.
it's amazing.
And we have two great people on the panel to discuss the work that voted on to revisit. The people that did vote had some say in what it was we were going to discuss, and what it is we were going to discuss is Mouse by Art Spiegelman. We went over Mouse in season 2.
This was the first episode I ever watched, too.
It was an early one that we taped. The discussion starter that I have for this is, in this graphic text, released in 2 parts, Art Spiegelman tells the story of his father, Vladik, and his experience of living in Nazi-occupied Poland during the Holocaust. Being Jewish, he and millions of others ended up in a concentration camp. While many accounts about the Holocaust were written, this took the form of a graphic novel, and not only told Vladik Spiegelman's story, but how Art Spiegelman interacted with his father and collected his story. Do you see any significance to the younger Spiegelman's approach?
I think the significance is that it kind of provides context, I guess, for the story of his father. That's probably all I'll say about it for now.
Kind of the same thing that Larry said. I didn't know how to word it. Yeah, it basically shows, so we're seeing it from the son's point of view, and I think it's great. We're seeing the story being told by the father to the son. So, we're kind of seeing it from his point of view being told from the point of another view person.
It's brilliant in the postmodern approach that it takes, where telling his story is one thing, and he could very well just depict present scenes with him and his father at any given time, but to also incorporate him coming to the house and his interactions with his father. Even that beginning snippet where his peers just, all they cared about is being the first one to a certain destination, and the last one there was rotten egg. How Vladik, the way he approached
He's like,
it.
friends!
Yeah.
You want to talk about friends?
Trap him in a room for a period of time, and then you'll see who's friends.
Right.
Yeah.
Just those interactions were brilliant, where it's him coming to the house and dealing with their Vladik and Mala's marital issues, and Mala keeping in mind Mala was his second wife.
Yeah.
His first wife, unfortunately,
It's mentioned that she killed herself.
Anja, she committed suicide.
Yeah.
And
1968.
also, Art Spiegelman wrote a graphic text about that too, and
Yeah,
they
and
make
it's
mention-
included.
they include that part and how Vladik reacts upon finding it,
Yes.
because Vladik really wasn't into Art Spiegelman's writing and the graphic text that he put together, but
Art was
that
surprised that his father found it. Or
Mhm.
that it found him, really.
found it and was really interested in that. And it also shows that Art is, he knows himself that he's perfectly flawed, because of you can see that in the interactions. He's a little bit selfish in a way.
You can see that, yeah.
You can see that because he doesn't want to bring his father in. He has no interest at all.
Yeah, I think in the mention, in the beginning, he hadn't seen his father for a certain amount of time,
Yeah, it's a theme in there. I mean, at one point he mumbles under his breath that his father's a murderer.
Oh yeah,
But
because he
that's
turned the
'cause
mother's stuff from
He threw her notebooks away.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's serious.
I would say he was a murderer. That's the one thing I don't really understand why he used that term. Yeah, the thing is, the writings of your mother, probably the last thing he probably has of her. Call your father a murderer? I mean.
And her contributions would have made for a very intriguing perspective.
Yeah, well, maybe they would have made for something that the father didn't want the public to know about. Like, there could have been some really horrible things that he was trying to keep that away from.
Possibly, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Just to keep it, didn't want people knowing all that kind of, real bad, evil stuff that happened to the woman that he loves.
Well, I mean, yeah, it was the Holocaust. A lot of bad things happened.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah.
That was also her because her original notebooks were destroyed during the Holocaust.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Then she redid it when she came to America.
Yeah.
And those were the ones that he destroyed.
Yeah.
But you had very perfectly flawed people where Mala, her chief concern was the money, even though she did come back because she had a sense of sympathy, but it's still not right to be more concerned about just taking the money out of the bank and leave the way that you did.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing about Art and his style is that he looks at himself as a documentarian.
Yeah.
And he's just trying to do the most accurate documentary, not only of the events that happened to his father, but the events of getting the story and what his father was like later in his life.
And what were your thoughts of the use of animals? The use of making the Jewish people mice, the Germans and the Nazis, the Germans cats,
and Polish were pigs.
Polish were pigs.
I feel like
French
maybe
were frogs.
Americans are dogs.
And the Swedes are moose.
And blacks were black people.
A black American was a black dog.
Yeah.
Was it a black dog? Okay.
Yeah, it was very. If it was American,
make out what it was.
Because
Americans are dogs.
Yeah, if you were American,
the Jewish people, no matter what nationality they were just drawn as mice.
Correct. But it's only the heads. The bodies are structured like people.
So they're anthropomorphic animals.
Yeah, they're more. It's kind of like Arthur, the cartoon.
Or Looney Tunes, or actually there's a lot of examples.
Not so much. Oh, kind of Looney, because Daffy Duck had hands, but he still had. It was more structured like a duck.
I mean, we're really.
But,
okay, well, there's a part where we do see what's underneath the clothes. But
when you see underneath the clothes in Mouse, a shirtless mouse has human parts.
Yeah.
We were talking about in our original discussion the reason to make them the animals that they are. For instance, the Jewish people being mice is that whole idea of, I mean, with the Germans and the Jewish as a cat and mouse game, but also the fact that they saw them as vermin. And I think Dr. Bordelon also brought a great point up that Art Spiegelman was heavily inspired by the concept of Mickey Mouse and how Mickey Mouse was a figure that people would be able to garner sympathy for. To have that structure and then add a predator like the cat and mouse and incorporate that between the Germans and the Jewish people was an interesting choice and an interesting direction to take. Polish people as pigs refers to their dietary interests, because the Polish people, they are very often associated with kielbasa.
Right.
Is that Polish?
Yes.
Yeah, kielbasa is the Polish sausage.
Okay, so the pig thing makes a lot more sense now.
In this area, they call it kabasi. I prefer kielbasa. I prefer the general term. They have the French as frogs because of their interest in frog legs. The Americans as dogs is just a great deal of lovable pride, and how the Americans always seem to come into the picture as the great heroes. You want something that everybody is going. You want to depict them as something that everybody is going to love. Most people can't help but love dogs.
Yeah. And what are cats afraid of? Dog.
There's that too.
That's that element as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting.
And the Swedish people as moose is that's only really depicted on a page when Vladek moves to Sweden before coming to America.
Right.
That has a lot to do with the fact that moose often live in the north and in cold areas, and Sweden is in a north cold area.
Yeah, I think I missed the part of the moose, like, somewhere in the book, despite reading it.
When he was
Yeah, I guess you mentioned it was very short, so I might have missed it.
Yeah, he was working in Sweden and announced that he was going to be moving to America. You have that, and then also something pertaining to a transaction that he was looking to make while he was up there.
Yeah, well, he got a job at a department store or something.
Yeah.
Because all the refugees he said up there, originally they were doing hard labor, and he wanted to find something, so he managed to find a store that would hire him. He ended up doing quite well.
Mm-hmm. There was so much that stuck out to this, as far as the moments of humor, moments of travesty, just moments of authentic humanity. I think one of the best quotes that I read about this is from the Times on the flap of this version. Spiegelman portrays the Nazis as cats, the Jews as mice, the Poles as pigs, and the Americans as dogs. They are all terrifyingly human.
Yeah.
Yep, I would agree with that. Like, the humanity of this story definitely shines through through the characterizations as an animal. I can't say why he did it. Like, I don't quite understand.
I think it does. It creates a unique appeal, though, too.
Yeah.
It makes the
It also
subject
makes
matter
the
more
story, like, a
approachable,
little bit-
maybe?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna
And
say.
it really, because a lot of people have written Holocaust works, and they've approached it in their own way. You have Elie Wiesel with Night. His approach was more from his perspective, however, it was raw. It was just what he
It's
foresaw.
about his experiences.
It was his experience, but he wasn't looking to make it flowery. He was just wrote it in a narrative format, but yet he wasn't doing anything to make it more colorful than it needed to be.
And then there's like the Diary of Anne Frank, which is like her diary, which explains during the time when they were in hiding. I don't think like, cause she didn't write anything when she was actually there. You know, she ended up dying in the camp.
She died right before they were freed.
Yeah.
So she was very close to being able to get saved. But unfortunately, that didn't happen.
Yeah, and you know, as this piece talks about, like the closer it got to the end, the more murderous the Nazis became. It seems.
They became desperate at the end. They were just looking to kill what they had.
Yeah, it's
Because they knew that
it's
they
such
were
an
getting close
awful.
enough. It is an awful. But it just came down to the fact that they were more concerned about wiping out a race, which, I mean, the ultimate goal was to create one Aryan race. The Jewish people, they felt, were the reason for their...
Well, there's that quote by Hitler right at the beginning where it says, Jews are a race, there's no question about that, but they are not a human race.
Yeah, like right there in the beginning of the book. It says that,
Something along those lines, something very close to that. Yeah, that's the dehumanization of the Nazis, and you know, it's what they did was so dehumanizing. Like, that's the word for it. So in a way that the mice and the cats kind of plays into
and the
that a little
seeds that
bit
they
somehow.
planted.
Well,
the seeds that they planted in order to turn people against each other. First from the top and making them look down, and then they planted seeds among those below them where they started turning on each other. Because when it comes to the fact that they need to save themselves or their immediate loved ones, then that's their motive of instinct. So that's how Vladek thought that he'd be able to go down to Hungary. And somebody said that everything was perfectly safe, so they were on their way down, and they ended up getting trapped. Captured on the way, because it turned out that the person that sent the letter, the note, was
was at Auschwitz. And he did so at the point of the gun, pretty much.
Yeah.
So to save himself, he had to do that.
Yes.
Now, that's a tough situation that I hope I never have to face.
Hopefully,
Like all of these situations. And the thing that really comes across for me is Vladek and how resourceful, prudent he was. And I think that he's able to hold on to his humanity because of the fact, like the other book that we've read dealing with the Holocaust for this channel, at least that I've read, was Necropolis. And in that story, unfortunately, the guy, when he was captured, he really had nobody to even think about looking after. Like, he was all by himself and had nobody around him. But Vladek was able to look after his wife and kids in a way that I think probably helped him hold on to his humanity throughout the horrors.
In the Holocaust, it was his wife. His son was killed because Richu, they sent him to a certain guardian who was overlooking some other young ones. However, when they were about ready to capture her, she would not let them take her.
Right.
So she poisoned herself and the others.
Yeah, and that is unfortunate.
Yeah.
But Vladek was trying. You know,
he
he didn't succeed at saving all of his family, but but that was a major motivation in his throughout. Like, he never just kind of forgot about everybody. Like, to the point where he was at Auschwitz eating next to nothing, but he knew that if the one piece of bread that he got to eat a day, if he could save that and exchange it for cigarettes, and exchange the cigarettes for something else, what was it, vodka? And then he'd be able to eventually do enough to get his wife out of where she was and get her closer to him, where he could keep a closer eye on. You know, and he did that. You know, I mean, and that is very sacrificial. And I mean, that's
what made
humanity.
That very last flashback very poignant, where the last thing that they talk about is when they come together again.
Yeah.
She was constantly going to a center where it keeps track of the Jewish people that were affected.
Yes.
And when he finally made his way.
Yeah, because she went back to the town, because that's what they said they would do if they ever got separated. They'd all meet back in the town that they were from. Yeah.
Right.
And then he finds out how horribly Poles are treating the returning Jews. Like, if they try to make any claim on property that was theirs before the war, the Jews and the Poles wouldn't think twice about killing them. How infectious that Nazi virus was. Not only did it infect all the Germans, but the Poles too, you know, started to make hay with the idea that the Jews weren't people and didn't deserve to be treated with dignity.
The issue at hand is not everybody is brave enough to stand up to the antagonizing forces, because there comes a point where you're putting your own life on the line. And as far as the Nazi soldiers are concerned, you have a choice between you support this immoral cause, and if you do so, we will make sure that you are looked after and we'll take care of your family, versus if you don't support the immoral cause, we're going to kill you, we're going to kill your family, and we're going to kill anybody else that may be connected to you and possibly poses a threat to us.
People with the resistance fighters during that time, like, they basically attacked from the shadows. They used guerrilla warfare. You know,
You had like Valkyrie.
They didn't attack like out in the open. Things that they were like lying in wait and then attacked. Like that's where like guerrilla warfare I believe started, like somewhere around that time.
Yeah, there was a lot that came out of Bayer aspirin actually comes out of Nazi Germany.
Well, guerrilla warfare really goes all the way back to the American Revolution. That's the way we fought.
Well, yeah, true.
Going back to them, Vladek and Anja reuniting in that scene, that's where Vladek wants to end. And at that point, he's pretty much worn himself out, and that's where Art Spiegelman ends the piece.
Yeah.
Except for he has the gravestone placard. The fact that it took him 13 years to work on the entire project.
Yeah.
Because this was originally released in Underground Magazine, then it would eventually become released in 2 parts on its own. It was 1986 for the first part, and then 1992 for the second.
When did it win the Pulitzer? You know?
Yes, it was 1992.
What would it win? Best literature? Best novel? What?
It was probably best graphic text.
Okay.
Technically, Volume 2 was released in 1991. From Pantheon Books, it was released in 1992. Another interesting scene pertains to when Vladek and Art and his wife were going to ShopRite, and they come across the
Store manager?
The store manager, but on the way back, they came across the black hitchhiker.
Yeah.
Vladek's disposition toward him was a contradictory between...
Well, it mirrors kind of how the Germans during that time would look at the Jew. Yeah, so that is an interesting...
And that kind of
aspect.
sentiment is what Hitler and the Nazi Party fed the Germans when it came to their disposition toward Jewish people. The way that it was executed, it came off as being
but at the
this
same
old
time, too,
racist, old individual that possesses prejudice.
And it's a prejudice that's based on his experience. You know, I mean, it's not coming to him through propaganda. It's what he experienced when he first came to the country. He noticed, you know, things would get stolen.
Yeah, and he thought that the hitchhiker was going to do that. But the hitchhiker was a cool guy. He just needed a ride, and he was appreciative of it.
Yeah. And then, you know, you get the sense too that there's a resentment that comes from that too. But I don't think that Vladek would have said that the hitchhiker was not a person, right? Was not a human being.
He wouldn't see him as like someone who needed to be executed. You know?
He used a Yiddish term that is viewed as derogatory.
Derogatory, sure, but like, you know, I mean, the Nazi ideology was like, these people aren't people. They're not worthy of rights. They're not worthy of dignity or anything.
Not worthy of life, basically.
Was Vladek like that? I wouldn't think that he would be. I don't think that he probably was. There's a gradient of racism where you're saying, well, I don't trust this race to they're not even human beings, they're animals. There's a gradient there, and I think Vladek, even though it is racist, would definitely, I would suppose, because of his own experiences, would be more on the lighter end of that.
That's often as a whole, Jewish people have the tendency to be more empathetic and defensive as far as defending other people that are dealing with prejudice is concerned, because a lot of it was fueled up from the events that took place during the Holocaust.
Yeah.
Does anybody have a favorite part in particular?
My favorite parts were actually not the parts of the Holocaust. Was actually the parts where where it goes to like, I guess you'd say modern day. I guess you'd say when this book's written.
That was very.
When he's talking with his father. For some reason, I like those more, like the conversation between those two, than I did the actual like Nazi story, which is weird. Normally, I'm usually the opposite on those things.
Yeah, I would be the opposite. I thought that the story of the father in the Holocaust was much more compelling. I don't know. I think the other stuff, by comparison, maybe a little gratuitous.
Yeah.
And you know, like I feel bad for Vladek because his son like seems to really resent him. Like I mean, there's a lot of that comes off the page that I'm not comfortable with. And not that this book should make you feel comfortable about any aspect, and it doesn't.
Yeah.
You know, I prefer the history. I think
both were necessary in order to make this the unique graphic text that it was.
Oh yeah, it's really good with like both aspects.
Yeah.
I would say the one moment that really stuck out was when Art was ready to head home, and he found Vladik ended up throwing out his coat because he didn't think it was in good condition. And he gives him a coat of his to wear, and it looks very thick.
There's also the one part where it's like, you gotta use a wire hanger on his coat. The thing is, you gotta use the wooden one.
I think that made the whole thing special.
Vladik is a very endearing character, both in his old age and in his young age. I hope his son appreciates that, because you wonder, because of the way he writes it. It's like, man.
Yeah, one of the things I thought was interesting is like before we were filming, Josh told me this was based on a true story. This is basically like the comic of how he ended up creating this book. Like, like the parts of modern day actually happened. And the parts of the past also actually happened.
Right.
It's all technically a true story. The humans are all changed to animals.
In parts, too, because that's another thing, too, is like at one point, they're not mice, but they're wearing mice masks. Did you just catch that?
Oh, yeah, there was that one part.
There's that one part
when he's talking
talking about writer's block, when he has the writer's block.
Yeah, and he's going to the
see
Oh,
his
yeah,
therapist.
the very last picture of one of the books actually shows, like, basically, I assume him.
It's the actual picture of Vladik.
Yeah.
In the
photo.
But he's got, like, a mice mask on.
Not in that pic. I mean, when they're going through pictures, they have his picture when he was in Auschwitz in the striped pajamas.
I was talking about something else that was in the book.
But they also, in the past, when they're trying to disguise themselves as Poles,
they'll wear pig masks.
Yeah, they wear the pig masks.
Yeah. But that's interesting because in that part, he is human. Like, so I'm not sure exactly what the artist is trying to convey in that instant. And as they wore the masks, but then there's that other part where, with the book within a book, right, which is about the grandmother's suicide and all that, and because that, I guess, is just a direct transplant, and everybody's human in that, like they're drawn as people.
Because that was released before Mouse.
Yeah, it was never really intended to be in it. And like I said, this guy, he sees himself as a documentarian, so
I think
he's going to put that thing in there as it was.
He breaks fourth wall time and time again because he knows that what people, they're reading it for what it is. It's not like he needs to hide anything. Because even the picture with his father at the very end, in the striped pajamas, is his picture. Not
when you go to that page, like the thing is like that thing stands out the most because like that's the first thing I noticed when I turned to that page.
Oh,
me too. Yeah,
like,
the actual
jumps
photo.
right out.
I was like, why is there a picture of a real person? And then I read it, and I was like, okay, so this is the actual picture of his father.
Yeah, the use of the pictures was just remarkable too at the very end. And
the snapshots and all that.
Yeah, that was the gift. That was the surprise that Vladik had for Art, even though Art thought that he found his mother's notebooks, but that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
Do we have any final thoughts?
It's a very compelling piece. It's like I said, the only other piece I've read about the Holocaust that I could compare it to is Necropolis, and it's an entirely different story. And I think where Necropolis, just to compare the two, because I can't help it because they're the only two I have, but where Necropolis was really focused on the dehumanization that the Nazis perpetrated, and I mean it is a very difficult read. It's very difficult to get through because it's so dehumanized, the way that the people are treated and the descriptions and everything, and it's just like the horrors of it really come through. And this is a more hopeful piece about the Holocaust, with, that it was possible to keep your humanity in there, and despite the horrors that are constantly pressing down on you. Very important. I would recommend either of them very strongly. I think that people need to be aware of these kinds of things and the dangers that come in treating people as if they're not human.
I've read a few pieces, many of them non-fictional, but some of them fictional, on the circumstances and what took place. This Necropolis night, I read Surviving the Angel of Death, which was Mengele twin, her account. I read something about a black man's account of living in Nazi Germany, The Nightingale. Everybody has a different voice, and that's necessary because so many people were affected. And they come from so many different angles. Boris Pahor from Necropolis was a Slovenian, he was an activist against fascist Italy, opposing force in that area, and that's what caused him to be captured and imprisoned. It wasn't Auschwitz, but it was still pretty heinous living conditions.
Yes, and there's different circumstances, right?
And Boris Pahor is the oldest living Holocaust survivor. He was born in 1913. The amazing thing about this is that this really depicts the travesty and immortality, how immoral things were in Nazi-occupied Europe during the Second World War. but at the same time is able to capture those moments of humanity and the way that people respond and cope with everything that took place. And approach that Mouse takes is very amazing. It's just, it's able to incorporate humor in the way of the storytelling, in the way that people are who they are and they respond how they respond.
Yeah, and he made some interesting choices too, and he's honest even about those choices, where Vladek didn't want certain parts of the story to be in the graphic text.
Yes, he did make
the premarital affair that he had with another woman. His name was, he doesn't want it.
But yet Art Spiegelman did put it in, and he made mention. He incorporated in the illustration or in the text.
Don't put it in there.
But he did.
Yeah, so it's just one more part of the way that he decided to do everything that I find interesting.
I think it's a great read. Definitely, as you mentioned, it shows the immorality and stuff like that. Like, basically how things were in occupied Europe during the time of the Nazis. People might dismiss it because it's got cats and mice in it. No, the thing is that's just used as basically a metaphor for something much larger. Like, the thing is, it's still dark and very human-like, but it's a bit more palatable, I would say, because the thing is they're animals, not human. It works to its benefit, but also creates great metaphor, and that's why I kind of like it.
How would we rate this? 0 to 5 stars, half stars permitted? Larry?
Let's see. I respect honesty. I think, especially in literature, and I think Art's probably, he's definitely one of the most honest writers that I've read. I would go with this work 4.5 stars. A very strong piece, and I don't understand all the decisions that Art made, or even a lot of them, but even still, the piece transcends all of that for me, and is really a great story of hope in circumstances that are unimaginably evil. So for that reason, I would definitely recommend it very highly. 4.5 stars.
Say 4.5 stars. I feel the thing is it's a very good read. Yeah, I don't understand every decision that he made, like the thing with the mask and showing the real life picture. But other than that, the thing is, it's a great story, and the fact that it was a real story kind of bumps up that half star for me.
I'm giving it a full Monty. I'm giving it 5 stars. I gave it a 5 stars when I read it for the first time in 2012, and I ranked it in my 10 best books that I read that year. I was able to revisit it now, and it was just as amazing. I think I got a lot out of it, especially this time, and a lot of it stuck. I just think that the way that he blends everything together is done perfectly. I think that as far as the depictions of when are the animals masked, the inconsistencies on that accord, I think that Art Spiegelman knows that it's merely an account. It's a story. It's a graphic text. The story itself is real. The events that took place and the quality of the characters is real. I feel that he knows that the use of animals is simply used metaphorically and more fabulistic, and maybe in the way that it would help readers become engaged, but yet I think they would also be able to sort out the fact that this is a story about people and humanity, what they have the power. If anybody is interested in reading The Complete Mouse, here is the book.
You also find a 2-part issue collection. That's what this one I have.
Hardcover edition.
So they all get different editions.
And before we go, because this is our 400th episode, I just wanted to thank you guys and everybody that has taken part on the panel and has followed us along as long as they have been. I just want to ask everybody if they had any what has stuck out this show, and if you have a favorite moment.
My favorite moment would have to be the this or that or that. The one where we had everyone along with what was her name, Ellie? That was probably my favorite moment. It's probably the moment when Ari fell on the ground. Also, I have to say, when we did the Death Note review, and a bunch of us died at the end. That part was really good. I love doing that one.
And then there was that time when you dressed up as the zombie.
Oh yeah, that was back. That was way back ago. Oh yeah, I forgot about that one.
I would say that the memory that speaks to me the most is probably the one where I laughed the hardest, which was when we were filming an episode. I don't even remember which one it was, but for whatever reason, Charlie was trying to distract us. Do you remember when he was standing outside that door dancing? Oh. He's shaking his booty. It was the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life.
I'm sorry.
That may end up in the intro for season 4.
Viewers, not to lose them.
Charlie always has the uncanny ability to make me laugh, so thank you, Charlie.
You're most welcome. If it's about the peacock, I'm going to cry.
if there's any moments that stuck out, it was the one time that we were playing with the rabbit on the discussion about guinea pig around the power of reason, when I gave it to Charlie. And don't damage it in any way, don't put it in your pants.
Yep.
And everyone
I think that was the same day as you did his dance.
Everyone was just roaring with that.
Yeah.
People couldn't contain themselves.
No, yeah, that session was hilarious.
But just the ways that we're able to incorporate humor, but at the same time, we're serious when we need to be, we're funny when we want to be. I think that really appeals to people. I think that if we can give someone a memorable experience, it will help them be engaged in reading and reading particular works. Great Gatsby, yeah, the same. That had so many outtakes and extra footage.
Oh yeah, I was there for that.
That was the signs.
Oh yeah, that was funny. Yeah, that was fun.
Having Dr. Esposito on twice. Having many of those instructors on too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, meeting all you people has been wonderful.
I think that probably our biggest moment was when we had Ellie here from Australia.
Definitely. Yeah, that was great.
I still remember the moment where the thing is that Charlie mentioned just a Wienermobile, and though you laughed the hardest I've ever seen you laugh in your entire life.
That was during Free-for-All.
Yeah.
Not to mention all the pieces of literature that I got to read that I probably wouldn't have otherwise. I've gotten a lot out of this experience, Josh. And thanks for making it happen.
Pleasure is mine, and we have a lot more to come.
And I read Shakespeare until I started doing this.
I've been able to discover a lot myself. I've been wanting to touch upon something, and this show has allowed me to do so. And then even works that I probably would not have picked up, except for this. And like The Martian by Andy Weir, everybody was talking about it. I really wasn't picking it up. I did. And Kingsmaker. Granted, I got a copy of The Martian for my birthday, but somebody said we should go over it, so I did, and I'm happy we did so. And I think Kingsmaker back in season 13 was... I almost wasn't going to take part in that, but because someone had to back out of that, I joined in, and it was a pretty unique experience. If I named everybody that made this show possible, we would be here for the rest of the night.
Yeah. But ultimately, Josh, that person is you. So again, thank you.
Without you, this wouldn't be possible.
Yeah, without you, this would have never happened, Josh. So we have you to thank you. Really
give a round of applause to Josh.
Yeah, Josh.
Thank you, guys. Be sure to join us next time on another episode of Literary Gladiators, where we hope to continue making more memories. Keep reading, everybody. Hi there, this is Josh, and on the next episode of Literary Gladiators, Casey, Charlie, Cindy, and I will be discussing Oysters by Seamus Heaney. If you like what you see on this channel, please support us on our Patreon, for the money that we make will allow us to provide you, the viewer, with even more content. Thank you, and for now, keep reading.